Hey everyone, welcome to Inside Indiana Overtime. I'm Seth Tao.
And Ben Ladner.
We are in an apartment in Manhattan
Yeah.
because we had to get out of Madison Square Garden before they kicked us out. Indiana fell to Rutgers tonight in the Big Ten tournament, 76-69, and really Indiana started off very, very well. They were up 24 to 8, 12 minutes into the game. Things seemed to be clicking on all cylinders, but then it just started to fall off.
Yeah, it kind of looked like a done deal early on. I mean, it was a 16-point lead for IU. They were hitting outside shots. They were playing really solid man-to-man defense, shutting off penetration really well. I thought the one play that kind of exemplified Indiana's start on the defensive end was Rutgers had a drive. I think Devontae Green was defending it. Did a pretty good job just man-to-man. And then Juwan Morgan came over from the weak side, pinned it against the glass, and it was just a perfect two-man defensive sequence where you funnel your man towards the help, you keep him within your kind of personal space on ball, and then you have your help defender come over and provide the backline defense. I just thought it was a great encapsulation of the way they were playing. And then on offense, Robert Johnson was clicking. He had, I think, his first two shots and then kind of dropped off from there. But I thought he was generating good looks. Devontae Green got some good looks and hit a three. I thought even, a guy like Josh Newkirk came off the bench and played well early on. Justin Smith looked pretty good in the beginning. Really, Indiana's entire roster. Freddie McSwain
Was very locked in.
made some really nice passes, played some good defense, rebounded the ball. That was another thing that jumped out to me is Indiana rebounded really, really well early on in this game. It was one and done pretty much every time down for Rutgers, and Rutgers was really struggling to create any kind of shot opportunities. And then when you're not able to offensive rebound, you're going to have a really hard time generating offense. And Indiana did a really good job defensively in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it was at least 5 minutes into the game before Rutgers even had a good look at a shot. I mean, Indiana was playing stellar defense and was clicking on all cylinders offensively. And then all of a sudden, Indiana started missing more shots. Rutgers started making some more shots. Indiana got a little sloppy at the end of the first half. Had 4 turnovers in the last few minutes of the half. And Rutgers ended up leading at halftime by 1 point, and it was just all downhill from there. Indiana was kind of playing from behind for the rest of the half. Rutgers, I don't think, ended up ever making the lead double digits, but they were up by as much as 9 at one point in the second half. Indiana did come back to tie it, but with the way Corey Sanders was playing, it was just an uphill battle. Corey Sanders was outstanding for Rutgers tonight, had 28 points on a 12 of 20 line, and it just seemed like there wasn't anything he couldn't do.
Yeah, he was on fire, and especially when you consider that a lot of those 8 missed shots that he had came in that early portion of the game. I mean, he was in the second half, I'm sure, a much better percentage.
And Indiana did it early that was another thing. Early in the game, they did a really good job of locking down Sanders.
I even thought later in the game, and you and I think, disagreed on this. We were talking on the subway ride back over here. I actually thought they did a pretty good job on Corey Sanders the entire game. To me, it's just one of those situations where a really great offensive player has a really great offensive night. And no matter what you do, he's hit a guy in a pickup basketball game before. Maybe we've been that guy in a pickup basketball game before where you just can't miss, and everything you shoot is going in, and you close out on the guy, and you play pretty good defense, and he just makes everything. If that's the case, you lose. I mean, that's just what happens. Corey Sanders was the best player on the floor tonight. He had an amazing offensive night, was hitting ridiculous jump shots.
Yeah.
And Colin Hartman said this after the game. They were forcing him into like 17, 18-foot jumpers, contested jumpers, fall away, step backs. Those are, mathematically speaking, the most inefficient shots in the entire game of basketball. And He was making them. I mean, those are the shots you want him to take. And if he makes them, you just kind of tip your hat and you say, okay, I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. And tonight there was nothing Indiana could do. I thought Devontae Green, in particular, did a really nice job against him. But even Josh Newkirk coming off the bench, I thought played pretty well. He got crossed up pretty bad one play and got a jump shot hit on him. But, I mean, that was happening to basically anyone who Indiana put on Sanders. Al Durham didn't spend too much time on him. Neither did Robert Johnson. Those guys struggled a little bit more. But, I mean, again, if you're getting a hand up, if you're contesting, if you're forcing him into tough shots, and you're, for the most part, taking away straight line drives to the basket, that's about all you can ask for defensively, and Indiana was doing that. Sanders was just hitting the shots anyway.
Yeah, you probably defended Sanders as well as they probably could have. Of course, there probably were a few possessions where could have been a little tighter here or there. But
there was one in particular that jumped out to me where Sanders got a screen, and Freddie McSwain, who was guarding the screener, was supposed to come over and cut. It was on the right wing, and Sanders went down and went for a baseline drive. McSwain was supposed to come over and slide and cut him off, and I think he got held up a little bit in the screen and wasn't able to get there on time, and Sanders just had a straight line to the basket and got an easy layup out of it. But that really was that was the one time that jumped out to me just off the top of my head that I can think of where he just had an unadulterated to the basket and an easy shot. The rest of them I thought were pretty difficult.
Yeah, and aside from Sanders, Deshaun Freeman was killing IU inside. He was getting pretty much anything he wanted to go, whether it was a field goal or he was pretty good at drawing fouls from Juwan Morgan and Freddie McSwain didn't finish with any fouls, but he got Juwan Morgan in some early foul trouble. And
Justin Smith as well.
Right, yeah. Freeman ended up with 15 points on a 7-12 line and 8 rebounds. And you kind of knew coming into this that Sanders was going to get his, and he's a tough player to stop. But Freeman may have been what killed IU in this game.
Yeah, he kept them alive while Sanders was starting to heat up, and he was the only offensive player that was doing anything for Rutgers early on in the game. And he kind of, gave them. Kind of allowed them to keep their head above water early on in the game to the extent that Rutgers even did that early in the game. And then once Sanders got going, he kind of stepped aside, took the step back, and allowed Sanders to kind of run the show. But in that intermediate period when Sanders wasn't quite cooking the way he got up to, it was really Freeman. That's who it was. It was Freeman who kind of held the team together. Sorry, it's 1:45 a.m. But yeah, he had a fantastic game. And then he was kind of the complimentary player early to Sanders. Sanders kind of had it going the whole game. And then later on, Geo Baker hit some big shots. He finished with 15 points for Rutgers. And he was really the beneficiary of some of the only real open three-pointers that Rutgers got all night. Indiana just didn't do a great job closing out on him. And I think that's the one guy you could point to when you say, okay, he probably should not have had as ridiculous a game. And it wasn't even that ridiculous of a game, but probably shouldn't have had as productive a game as he did. Indiana probably could have limited him a little bit better.
Yeah, Baker had 15 points on a 4-of-8 clip coming off the bench. We're not going to get too much into the post-mortem for Indiana. That'll come at a later time. But getting into at least how Indiana's individuals performed in the game. Juwan Morgan finished with 15 points and 9 boards, but Archie Miller kind of talked about it after the game that Freeman, that may be where he shined the most defensively. Rutgers did a really good job of limiting Morgan's touches, his opportunities, and even 15 points and 9 boards is a solid line, but even with that, it didn't feel like he had the impact on the game that he normally does.
Yeah, 15 and 9 on 55% shooting, pretty solid, but the fact that he only took 9 shots, it didn't feel like Juwan Morgan had that great of a game. It didn't feel like he played as well as his numbers indicated. Rutgers made his catches really difficult. They pushed him off of his spots. They didn't allow him to get to where he wanted to get. And when he did put the ball on the floor and he was going to the basket, they sent extra bodies at him and they made things really difficult. And you could tell, I think, down the stretch, Morgan was a little frustrated. Indiana was coming at the basket that we were right behind in the second half of the game. And there were a couple plays where Morgan would have the ball stripped or he wouldn't catch it cleanly. And wouldn't be able to get a shot up like he wanted to, and you could kind of see the look on his face where he was a little frustrated. That happened a couple times in the final 3 minutes when it started to slip away from Indiana, and I mean, credit Rutgers for that, to be able to frustrate the other team's best player to the extent that he's only able to get up 9 shots, and most of those rebounds for Juwan Morgan came pretty early on in the game.
Yeah.
During the portion of the game that actually turned it, Juwan Morgan wasn't quite as effective on the boards. He had 2 blocks tonight, but again, I think both of those came in the first half, and in the second half wasn't as effective there. So Rutgers, I think, had a great game plan against him. It's kind of one that we've seen all season long. Teams are willing to leave other guys open if it means sending an extra guy at Juwan Morgan and limiting his effectiveness. And all year long, Indiana's supporting cast was just not able to capitalize on that. And tonight, it was a similar story. Al Durham had a nice game. He didn't attempt a field goal, but he still scored 10 popoints. I don't think I've ever seen that done before.
Rutgers fouled him on the 3-pointer twice, and he nailed all 3 free throws both times. He had 10 points off the free throw line, a solid line for Durham.
But I mean, you look at the rest of Indiana's roster.
Right. That's
Zach McRoberts was 1 for 1, but he only took one shot.
This was not a good game in terms of fitting in for Zach McRoberts, because he's at his best when he's able to key in on the opponent's best player, and he just doesn't really match up well with Corey Sanders. You need McRoberts guarding one of the bigger guys on the floor, and he's great against kind of limiting a Miles Bridges or limiting a Vincent Edwards or that type of player. But Corey Sanders, a smaller guard, McRoberts isn't going to be defending that type of player. And when you take away his defensive skills, his offense obviously just doesn't make up for it. So it wasn't the type of game where McRoberts really fit in well. And clearly he just didn't have the type of impact that he's had in a lot of other games. And really, some of the other supporting cast members that had kind of been keys to Indiana's recent success towards the end of the regular season were kind of reverted to some old trends, I thought. Devontae Green finished 3 of 8 for 7 points with no assists and 3 turnovers. And it just seemed like at times he looked good at times in stretches, and defensively, again, we talked about it, he did pretty well against Corey Sanders, but offensively, it seemed like he reverted to some old sloppy trends, just being careless with the ball. I mean, he had 3 turnovers, but there were probably 2 or 3 other passes that he made that easily could have been turnovers. And then Justin Smith also was very passive tonight, I thought. He only attempted 4 shots, and he had 3 turnovers as well, only 4 points. And for him, I thought it was a case that he hasn't really had that many games later in the season where he's looked like a freshman, but he looked like a freshman tonight.
He did, yeah. It was a similar game plan to the one that Rutgers sent at Juwan Morgan. They weren't allowing Smith to catch the ball where he wanted to, and so much of what Smith does offensively is kind of that catch, pivot, maybe take one dribble, and go straight up to the basket. And he just wasn't afforded those opportunities tonight. Rutgers was packing the paint. Smith, I think, he forced a tough mid-range jump shot at one point, which it was at the end of the clock, I think, and those are just not the looks that you want from Justin Smith. So I think the areas of the floor from which he likes to work were taken away, or at least kind of suffocated tonight, and so he wasn't able to be as effective from there. And then on defense, I just think, he competed, he played hard, but again, he's a freshman, and you're going to have those nights, and when a team is cooking the way Rutgers was, it's tough for a guy like that to kind of fit in with the pace of the game and kind of, acclimate himself to that. That can be a tough challenge. But really, you mentioned the rest of the supporting cast. Just, it's been the similar story where if you take away Juwan Morgan, you need somebody else to contribute. You need Robert Johnson to step up and hit some shots, which he wasn't able to do until really, really late in the game when it was too late. You need Josh Newkirk to hit some shots. He only hit 1 3, although I thought played a solid game other than shooting the ball, which I realize is a big part of the game. I get that. But yeah, I mean, you don't have much production from anyone outside Juwan Morgan. He was one of 2 players in double figures. We mentioned the Durham trips to the free throw line. 1 of 3.
Johnson ended up in
Robert and 12 points, yeah, because he hit the 2 threes late. But again, too little, too late from Robert Johnson there. And most of the game, he was 2 for 14, 2 for 12, or I should say 2 for 10. Just, not a solid game from Indiana's supporting cast. And when you don't get a monster effort from Juwan Morgan, it's just not going to be enough.
Right. So that's about all the analysis I think we have for.
That's all I've got.
Yeah, that's about all we got from this game. Indiana falls to 16-15 overall on the year, 9-10, a Big Ten record, and we'll see what happens from here as Indiana's out of the Big Ten tournament, and it seems unlikely that they would get into the NIT. We'll see what happens on Selection Sunday. And Archie Miller said after the game he ruled out the possibility of Indiana playing in a tournament lower than the NIT, such as the CBI or anything like that. So if Indiana doesn't make the NIT, there won't be any postseason.
Yep.
So we will see what happens with Selection Sunday. But until then,
we will still be at the Big Ten tournament. Indiana.
We're here until the end of the weekend.
Yeah.
But for now, for Ben Ladner, I'm Seth.